In the late 1850s, a slave named Dred Scott sued for his freedom. Dred Scott had been bought as a slave in Arkansas. He was taken into Wisconsin territory, which was free soil territory, and then he was taken back after a number of years, a decade or so, back into the Arkansas territory. He sued for his freedom, arguing that by being taken into a free soil territory, he had been liberated because slavery was not allowed there. So taking him back in as a slave was akin to kidnapping. This was an argument that in the 40s and the 50s had been used successfully by many former slaves. But by this point, the issue of slavery has become so tense that it's going to fail at the Supreme Court level. Now, the Supreme Court, when this case gets there, it's called Dred Scott versus Sanford. When the Supreme Court gets this case, the Supreme Court is led by Chief Justice Robert Taney. Taney is a slaveholder himself, and there's 4 other slaveholders on the court. Now, since there's only 9 Supreme Court justices, the 5-4 majority would go to the pro-slavery Southerners. They decided against Dred Scott. And the logic of their argument was that, first of all, Scott was a slave and not a citizen. He shouldn't even have the right to sue. Now, that should have just thrown the case out of court, but they decided to take it a step further. In Taney's decision, he argued that not only was Dred Scott a slave, but as slave, he was only property. And because Scott was property, the slave owner cannot lose their property simply by crossing state boundaries. He argued that slave owners have due process rights that must be followed before their property can be taken away. Now, what this does is negate all of those compromises that had come before. Even though the Kansas-Nebraska Act had gotten rid of the Missouri Compromise, the Missouri Compromise was deemed to be unconstitutional. This threw the Northerners for quite a loop, because they had been arguing that compromises could solve the solution. But now, because slavery couldn't be banned, they were afraid that state laws banning slavery would be overturned as well. So the North was worried that that democratic principle of popular sovereignty, semi-democratic, wouldn't be used to keep slavery from expanding. In fact, they were worried that if this logical extreme of this ruling is followed past the Missouri Compromise, because it only applied to the Louisiana Purchase territory, that slavery nowhere could be restricted, because you could buy all of your slaves in Arkansas and then take them to California if you wanted. And the issue of free soil and the Northern fears that the Southerners were going to implement slavery across the country led to a split in the Democratic Party. Those Northern Democrats start following the Republicans, and then when Abraham Lincoln, the Republican candidate in 1860, runs for office, he wins largely on a platform of free soil and only carrying northern states.